hard to believe that it has been 1 year. Last summer, on June 24, 2021, the Champlain Tower South in Surfside, Florida, collapsed, killing 98 people inside. We covered it from the very beginning since it first broke here on the show. Well, one of those victims was 92-year-old Hilda Noriega. And as we mark 1 year since this tragedy happened, I'm actually being joined right now by Hilda's grandson, Michael Noriega. Michael, I wish we were speaking under better circumstances. We're so sorry for your loss. How are you doing? How have you and your family been holding up?
We've been holding up. This is a much tougher week because it just brings us back to the nightmare that we were living the week that this first happened. And so it's been tough, but this too will pass. We'll get through it.
Absolutely. And we'll get to that day and what happened moving forward here in just a minute, but I want to talk about your grandmother because I've followed your story since this tragedy first happened, and it seems like you and her and your entire family had a beautiful relationship with her. So can you tell us the amazing things about her, her story, and really just everything as we commemorate and talk about her life?
Absolutely. My grandmother was the matriarch of our family. Everything that we did as a family, she did with us, whether it was vacations or getting together on the weekends and having lunches and dinners together. You know, my grandmother, she truly lived for her faith, her family, and her friends. She was so full of love. And the reason why is because she truly was a woman of faith. She lived with God's love at the center of her heart. And so that would just overflow out of her into the people around her. And she was just so loved that people that would meet her for the first time would be like, oh my gosh, this woman, she's so amazing. My sister, who was actually the listing realtor for my grandmother's apartment, earlier that day, hours before the collapse, my sister was showing it to a family. And that family said to their realtor, oh my gosh, does she come with the sale of the property? We would love to keep her. I mean, that is just how much her light radiated from inside of her. And so I'm just so grateful for my grandmother's life, because not only has she had a tremendous impact on my life, but even in death, she's having an impact on so many others' lives. I was looking at something the other day as an idea to memorialize her. And what I read was, to those whose light has been extinguished, let this be in memory of you. And I read that and I was like, even though my grandmother's no longer here with us, her light is not extinguished. As a matter of fact, her light is just warming up. The mission of my life, I feel that my calling is that people find hope and healing through the type of life that she lived, that the love that she lived with somehow gets from our hearts to their hearts and just gives some type of hope that, you know what, time is so precious. Time is so unforgiving. So let's let love be our legacy. And so I'm so, so grateful for her. And I think one of the reasons that we've been able to be strong through this has not only been because of our faith, has not only been because of God just carrying us through this, but it's also been because she was so strong. My grandmother was 92 years old, and she lived her life like she was in her 60s. She had so much energy. She was so independent, and she had so many friends, such a big social life. It was just so beautiful to see. So at one point, my grandmother had cancer. She beat that. At 91 years old, my grandmother had COVID. She beat that. And the fact that a building had to fall on top of her to take her out, I think is so symbolic of her faith and how strong of a life that she lived, but yet so gentle with love at the same time.
And you make so many beautiful points, Mike. And when it comes to your faith and the prayer and love that you were surrounded by when this happened, we should let our viewers know that in just a little bit, we're going to talk about the signs that you got from her, an incredible part of this entire story. But Mike, I do want to ask you if you could take me through June 24th of last year from, this happened very, very early in the morning. So walk me through what happened in your eyes from the moment that you found out and, really that first day.
So Ileana Gonzalez, who lived directly across from my grandmother, she somehow, through a miraculous turn of events, was asleep in her bed in the tower that collapsed minutes before it collapsed. And she woke up and ran out of the building. And while she was running down the stairs, the tower that she was just in collapsed. And the first phone call that she made was to my father. And my father really didn't know what was going on. All he could do was get dressed and get down there. And my mother called me and said, "Hey, your brother and I are coming to pick you up. Something happened to your grandmother's building." And when I got in the car, when they picked me up, my father was on the phone. And the entire car ride, he didn't say anything other than, "The building is gone. The building is gone." And we were saying, what do you mean the building is gone? My father was in such shock, he couldn't utter out any other words. So we pulled up on the south side of the tower that was still standing on Collins. And so as we walked up, we couldn't see the side that had collapsed. And so we were relieved at first because we were thinking the building's not gone. I mean, we see the building right here, but as we as we got more to the south side of the building that had collapsed, we saw the devastation. And it was such an overwhelming moment that it really took a couple hours to realize that this is not just a nightmare. This isn't something that we're going to wake up from. This isn't a movie set. This isn't our imagination. This is our new reality. And we saw my grandmother's patio furniture that we had spent so many endless conversations on having many times. And it just, to see her patio furniture on top of the rubble, just across from the pool deck where we were, it was crushing. I don't have words. The waves of emotions, the confusion, the devastation, the shock, the anger, the sadness, the brokenness. It was so much at once. And I didn't know what to do. And so I eventually just kind of found my own little corner to sit in. And I put in my AirPods and I started listening to worship songs that my church, VU Church right here in Miami, had made. And there was one song that I was listening to called Shelter In. And the whole song is based out of Psalms. And it basically talks about how God is our refuge and our strength. And the beauty of that song called Shelter In is that the very building that my grandmother trusted to shelter her had ultimately collapsed and had let her down. And I realized that putting my faith into anything in this world, it's eventually going to collapse. It's not going to last. And that this situation was so much bigger than me. It was so much bigger than my family. We knew we couldn't handle it. And so in that moment, I just had to cry out to God and ask God for strength, ask God to carry us through this, because he's our ultimate shelter that will not fail us. And so we had to trust him through it. And I'll never forget that when I was just sitting, listening to those songs, those same three songs over and over and over, but specifically that song, Shelter In, I just felt God whispering into my spirit, giving me a sense of peace, saying, if your grandmother is alive underneath that rubble, just know that my presence is with her and that your grandmother's okay. You don't have to worry. But also know that if your grandmother's body is underneath that rubble, but her soul is not, know that she's in heaven in my presence. So either way, your grandmother, she's in my presence and she's okay. And it was in that moment that, although I was completely hoping that my grandmother was still alive and that there would be a miracle of the ages to talk about, my faith wasn't attached to a result. It was anchored in God's strength and God's promises, knowing that either way she was in his presence.
And, Mike, you mentioned being out there at that site, even just on day one. And then from that point forward, as rescue efforts got underway, it was a waiting game. And, unfortunately, you and your family weren't the only ones sitting there hoping for some positive news. Overall, what was that experience like, waiting to see if there would be somebody found alive, if your grandmother would be found alive? What was that experience like for you guys?
It was scary because our imaginations tend to run wild in moments like that. We remember early on they had asked my father for a DNA sample, and that was so confusing. Why do they need a DNA sample? And the truth is that there were bodies that were found that really weren't even bodies; they were just remains, and they needed DNA to be able to, identify who it was. And it just that was a very scary thought. And then the other scary thought is, what if my grandmother is alive underneath all of that? Is she suffering? Is she in pain? Is she bleeding? Is she dehydrated? I mean, so many things. But again, that's where faith comes in. I truly believe that our faith begins where understanding ends. I think a lot of people think that faith, the opposite of it, is doubt. That's actually not true. The opposite of faith is sight. If you can see it, you don't need faith. And this was one of those things that we could not see it. And so we had to hand it over to God and trust him through it. And so fortunately for us, it was only 5 or 6 days. She was the 12th person found. Um, so that was very, very hard. That was very, very hard. And so during that time, I was fortunate enough to be able to do many interviews where I was able to share her story like I am now, to give God the glory, because I wanted people to know about her legacy of love, regardless of what the end result was.
And Mike, something that was incredible, and I remember watching an interview where you had a bunch of different things in your hands. Can you walk us through, the fact that you and your family are sitting there waiting? There is an entire pile of rubble, but you came across some of your grandmother's belongings. Can you walk us through that moment and what was found?
Absolutely. So when we had first gotten there, there really was not a perimeter that was set up yet. We were never actually in or on the rubble. No first responder would allow us there, nor did we want to be there. But on Collins Avenue, I mean, there was dust everywhere. There was all kinds of debris, and we just started to notice that there were ties, there was clothing, there was bills and letters and pictures, and just all kinds of things that had just blown out from the impact of the collapse. And my father stepped on something and looked down, and it was actually a birthday card that had been given to my grandmother just 2 weeks prior to the collapse. And it had her name on the front. And there was a butterfly, not only on the envelope, but all over the card itself. And the beauty of that is that symbolize the butterflies, they symbolize metamorphosis, going from one life to another. And so to know that that was the very first thing that we found was scary but comforting at the same time, because we knew it was a message in the mess. We just didn't know quite yet what the message was. And so once we realized that was there, we started to realize what else could be here. And so we started to look and search in the area and the pool deck of the hotel next door. And we found two pictures, both of my grandparents. One picture is of my grandparents when my dad was just a kid, and the other one is of my grandparents later on in life when they were on vacation together, which was just so beautiful. But what most people don't know is when the homicide detectives gave us the news of the confirmation of her death, they handed us a brown paper bag. And within that brown paper bag was 6 different rosaries. And the significance of that is I had been talking about how my grandmother lived for her faith, her family, and her friends. So God was so faithful that normally when somebody passes away, you get to keep their things, but we didn't get to do that because all her things were in that rubble. But yet the only things that we did get to keep the birthday card that symbolized her friendships, the pictures that symbolized her love and affection for her family, and then lastly, the rosaries that symbolized her deep faith in Jesus and her love for God. And it was such a full circle moment that in the moment of finding out the news of her passing, there was also just a full circle moment where it was God confirming she is safe in my presence. Your grandmother's life and legacy is complete. And in that moment, our family, we just started weeping and crying. Half of it was really out of sadness and brokenness, but the other half was just out of joy that God, he was so good in that moment to give us those messages in the mess. And so it brought us so much comfort, and it brought us even a sense of joy in that moment.
Yeah, and Mike, I'm such a huge believer that you do get signs from the people that you love, no matter where they are, and to get those pictures and to have that, who in your family, where are these things that were found? Are they keepsakes at this point?
Yeah, they're treasured mementos that we keep very safe, and my father has them, and so we'll treasure those forever.
Absolutely. Mike, as this situation unfolded and we saw rescue efforts, we had those daily updates. The huge question was, how did this happen? Why did this happen? Have you and your family been kept in the loop on the investigation that unfolded after this tragedy struck? And do you know where they're at now necessarily?
The only information that we have is the same information that's released publicly, because everybody needs to know. This is so much bigger than the families that were directly affected like us, because obviously we want closure as to, number one, why did this happen? How did this happen? But then the biggest question is, how do we make sure that this never happens again? Buildings are not supposed to just collapse and fall in the middle of the night, and kill the very thing, kill people that are trusting the very thing to shelter them. And so I would just say that in this scenario, we want answers now. I think everybody wants answers now so that everybody feels safe in the comfort of their own home. But we want the right answers. We don't want the quick answers that might be incorrect. So if this investigation needs to take a little bit longer so that it's thorough and it's been tried and tested and we know the truth, then it's worth the wait, it's worth the patience, especially if it's going to save lives in the long run.
Absolutely. And when it comes to this happening and affecting your entire community, have you felt supported by your community? Do you still stay in touch with some of the families that also lost loved ones in this collapse?
Absolutely. So my experience was a little bit different than most families, I would say, because due to my father's position as a first responder, he was on ground zero every single day until we received the news of my grandmother's passing. And so we were by his side the whole time. And I really didn't have much of a chance to connect with the families. But since then, I've had some opportunities. And just last week, I got a chance to meet some very special people. One of them was Jonah Handler and his father. Jonah was on the 10th floor in his room with his mom when the ground beneath them just disintegrated, and they both fell 10 stories and survived. And Jonah was the first one pulled out of the rubble, and he's alive and well today, thank God. But his mom didn't make it. And I also got to meet with Raquel Oliveira, who lost her 5-year-old son and her husband. And one thing is our own pain. That's something that we have to live with. But to see the pain that others have to live with, it really, it's not something I sympathize with. It's something I empathize with. And as others share their pain, I feel their pain. It just becomes exponential. And so I think that's really what's so driven the mission of my life. And that's why I'm so grateful for my grandmother's life that she has so changed the mission of my life. You know, a verse I've seen so many times since the collapse is Psalm 34:18, that the Lord is near to the brokenhearted, but he rescues those that are crushed in spirit. And I had to ask myself, why does God want to be close to our heart when we're brokenhearted? Because he's not trying to rescue us from a broken heart, but he's trying to rescue us from a crushed spirit. And what I realized is that in this life, you can't avoid heartbreak. Man, people are going to pass away. People are going to let us down. People are not going to meet our expectations. People are going to betray us at times. There's going to come a grieving process with that. But a crushed spirit is something completely different. A crushed spirit is a spirit that has lost all faith, has lost all hope. And it's like a well without water. It just is void of any purpose. And so my grandmother has so inspired me that I feel that my calling is, how can I help others that have gone through tremendous tragedy, just like this, go through life where they're going to have a broken heart at times without it breaking their spirit, without it crushing their spirit. And I believe that the answer to that is that I believe that God, his heart breaks when our heart breaks. And so because he not only understands our pain, but empathizes with our pain, that he wants to be with us in that pain. And if we let him near to our broken heart, then he'll actually rescue us from having a crushed spirit, that he will rescue us from losing our faith, hope, and purpose.
And I think that's so important, Mike, especially in the wake of a tragedy, to take what happened to you and to use it and help other people is so big, and it's really noble. It's crazy, like I said, to think that it already has been 1 year. I know that you are spearheading a lot of memorial events. So what can people expect in the Surfside community in Miami to mark this 1 year?
So that's a great question. There's a lot of public events that are happening. One main one, the families will be gathering privately around the time of the collapse. But at 10 a.m., there's going to be a public event that's going to be happening from 10 a.m. to noon right there on the collapse site. And then I'm also going to be holding a gathering that is just really going to be more about prayer and reflection and memorializing. And it's going to be a time where we're sharing faith and sharing hope. I think that people are most willing to be open to listen to hope when they're in pain. There's a saying that pain is God's megaphone. And so that's going to be my gathering that I'm going to be doing personally in the evening of this Friday on the 1 year anniversary. So there is going to be a lot going on. And I'm grateful that that Surfside is really facilitating a lot of these events that are happening to help bring healing and gather the families together to honor those that were lost.
And it's also so important, like you mentioned, that even though we're marking 1 year, you want your grandmother's legacy and her story to live on, as is all these families do. Can you talk a little bit about future endeavors? I understand that you were contacted to partake in a documentary about this condo collapse, and I also understand that you may be writing your own book. What can you tell us? Can you give us a little glimpse into what is to come?
I am writing a book. Kind of on what I just spoke about. How do you go through life with a broken heart, but not allow it to crush your spirit? And it's all going to be centered not only around the Surfside collapse, but honoring the families and those lost in the Surfside collapse. And then I'm very grateful to be able to partner with Jason Kennedy, he's an amazing TV personality, but he's an even more amazing person and a great man of faith. And so I'm very excited to be partnering with him and Atlas Films to be able to be doing this, because there are so many families like ours that have gone through tremendous pain. And we know how the 98 souls died, but the real question is, how did they live? What was their legacies? And we want to give those families a voice, not only in the process of their experience of what happened, really in the crushing of that night, but also an opportunity to lift up the names and honor their loved ones as well.
Absolutely. Well, Mike Noriega, we really appreciate you coming on with us, sharing your grandmother's story and about, moments that are just literally unthinkable. Is there anything else you want our viewers to know? Any more takeaways from your experience over this last year? Any last remarks?
Yeah, going back to a question that you asked me, one thing that I'm so grateful for that I think truly just not only helped our family, but helped this community was to see how everybody, after the collapse happened, came together. Everybody was just unified in community to see how the first responders on local levels, on other state levels, even the rescue response team from Israel. There was just so many people from really around the globe that wanted to be part of a solution for a problem that really didn't have a solution. And so whether it was passing out water, whether it was getting food for first responders, whether it was contributing and donating to families that had just lost everything overnight, we're just so grateful for how families just came together to bring unity and community. I know that so many local churches, Casa Church right there in Surfside, VU Church, my church right here in Miami, so many just organizations had such a large role. And we're just so grateful because everybody coming together, it's made such a big difference for us. And I firmly believe that there's times in life that we don't have the strength to carry ourselves. And the beauty is when you have other people that love and care about you enough or empathize with you enough that they're willing to carry you at a time that you can't carry yourself. It's really a beautiful thing. And so this time has really reminded me of 9/11. 9/11, we put the politics aside, we put our differences aside, and we focused on how can we be unified and love one another. And so it's really beautiful to see how that came together so quickly.